Good morning. Welcome to the online live class of MPC005. Whoever in this live, please write your name, enrollment number, study center code in chat box. Good morning, Priyanka. Please write your name, enrollment number, and study center code together. Please write your name, enrollment number, and study center code together. Please write your so far only 3 have written. Rest of you, please write your name, enrollment number, and study center code together. Jilam, Sujata, Suparna, Manashi. Okay, so we're discussing the last 2 units. Quantitative research methods of psychological research. Quantification is necessary, very much necessary for we can measure any trait, any characteristics. Let us begin with the meaning of quantitative research. It is defined as a type of scientific research that tries to bridge the gap of incomplete information, systematically collects evidence, produces findings, and thereby seeks answer to a problem or question. It is wisely used in collecting and understanding specific information about the behavior, opinion, values, and other social aspects of a particular community, culture, or population. What is said here? That it tries to bridge the gap of incomplete information. It implies that the quantitative research methods they do not give us complete information. Some gap remains. What we do, we systematically collects evidence and produces findings of minute details of individual specific information, which is lost when we collect quantitative data. An example is given here. A qualitative research can be studying the concepts of spiritual development among college students. Now we cannot quantify the spiritual development. We cannot say I have 10 spiritual development, X has 15 spiritual development, Y has 20 spiritual development. We cannot say that. But what we can do, we can collect the personal experience of me, X and Y, and that we can do. So quantification, where quantification is not possible, we may take refuge to qualitative research method. This is done by a researcher named David in 1995. What he actually tried to analyze that if there is uniformity or considerable diversity in people's understanding of spiritual development. So there is a pre-established of the participants of their experience, description of the participants' experience regarding spiritual development. Therefore, qualitative research helps in providing an in-depth knowledge regarding human behavior and tries to find out reasons behind decision-making tendencies of humans. Not every time it is possible to quantify the reasons. How much motivation, how much reasoning, how much intuition cannot be determined unless we take a qualitative account into consideration. Means the description of their experience. There are different types of qualitative research. What are those? First of all, there is case study. We have already read about this case study. With the help of this method, a case of an individual, group, event, institution, or society is studied. A subculture can be studied as a case. So we can always study, case doesn't mean only individual, we can always study group, even a society through case study. It helps in providing an in-depth knowledge of the nature, process or phenomena of a specific case under study. There are several methods of data collection are involved in case study. What are those? That also we have studied. Interviews, observation, documents, questionnaires. We can apply and we actually apply those methods for collecting data in order to prepare a complete case study. Therefore, what happens? The final report of the case study that provides a rich, that means vivid and detailed and holistic. You can describe the person, the group, the event, the society, the culture as a whole, or you can describe a particular part of that process through case study. Next comes ethnography. This approach mainly focuses on a particular community. It is more of a kind of closed field observation and basically tries to study a socio-cultural phenomena. You have heard about the Jarwa community of Andaman, very conservative and what to say, very isolated uh, group of subculture. In order to study them, they do not give easy entry to any outsiders. In order to study them, one need to first to gain their trust, to mix with them, to adapt their culture, and then prepare a report. That will be the kind of ethnography. Therefore, it is said rightly that this approach mainly focuses on a particular community. For example, judging others based on the researcher's cultural standard. Ethnography can be used for comparative analysis of cultural groups, eating habits of North Indians and South Indians. It is also known as ethnology. Further, it can also be used to analyze the cultural past of group of people, cultural past of Bengalis, cultural past of Marathis, Even they may go as far as Harappan civilization, cultural past of human civilization as a whole. This aspect is known as ethnohistory. The third approach of qualitative study is historical method. Now, this method helps in understanding and analyzing causal relationship. With the help of this technique, the data related to the occurrence of an event is collected and evaluated in order to understand the reasons behind occurrence of such events. It sounds like experimental method, isn't it? But there is a fundamental difference between the two. In actual experimental method, that there will be quantification, but here already occurred event is collected and evaluated to understand the reasons behind occurrence of such events. Suppose if someone wants to study the reason behind the partition of India, that will follow historical method. There will be no place for uh, quantification. You all know you cannot find the reasons in quantity behind the partition of India. But you can always collect events of that time and analyze them with your own pre existing framework of knowledge of history and culture and socio-political thoughts, and try to analyze that why that partition took place. It helps in testing hypotheses concerning cause, effects, and trends of events that may help to explain present events and anticipate future events as well. With the analysis of the reasons behind partition of India, you can always explain, you can always analyze its present consequence. What has taken place right now as a result, which related, can be related to the partition of India. What kind of events in social situation, in politics, in economics, that can be related to that event in past, and also the trends in future, how it will be going to impact the future events. The fourth approach is grounded theory. This approach involves an active participation of the researcher in the activities of the group, culture, or the community under study. Uh, in grounded theory, the researcher may act as a participant observer. There is an active participation of the researcher. The data regarding the required information is collected with the help of observation. It is generally used in generating or developing theories. This means that the ground theorists cannot only work upon generation of new theories, they can test or elaborate previously grounded theories. So, two outcomes can be possible with this kind of approach. Since there is a scope to verify, to test the current data with the pre-existing knowledge framework. What are the important characteristics of a grounded theory? First of all, fit. It helps in analyzing whether the theory corresponds to real existing community. There may be a pre-existing theory about particular subculture of say Eastern India or South India. Grounded theory gives the scope to help in analyzing whether the theory corresponds to real existing community. The next important characteristics is understanding. The theory generated by grounding is clear and understandable. In this, the grounded theory approach is designed in such a way that it is quite simple, clear, and it is understandable by many of the uh, many of the students who do not have any, may not have any pre-existing knowledge about this approach. Number three is generality. The theory provides much information and scope for further analysis or generating more theories. And lastly, the fourth characteristics is control. The theory generated is valid as it has been analyzed under control condition. This also sounds a little like experimental method, because in experimental method, controlling of extraneous variables sorry, is an important part of the process. Well, there are also functions of grounded theory. Let us discuss that because we will be discussing grounded theory later in more detail. Okay, forget it. Uh, Now it is written here functions of grounded theory. It helps in identifying anchors or codes that allow the key points of the data to be gathered. That means the major points on which you will gather the data. Uh, I guess we will get better example in later, but now I can give you some impromptu example. The anchors may be dress code, food habits, um, uh, education, um, or like that. That means the major aspects of a culture, the celebration of certain rituals and celebration of certain events, certain you know functions, social functions, celebration of social functions. All these things can be the anchors or codes for collecting data. It helps in making implicit belief systems explicit with the help of researchers, questions, and analysis. That means if I have already an established grounded theory about a subculture or a culture or a society, and we know what may be the key points, the major points uh, of data collection, then we can frame questions uh, and analyze them likewise, so that we can elicit information about the belief system which is implicit, which is not expressed or manifested in the activities. Number of a set of steps which whose careful examination and analysis continue throughout the study. Generally, what happens in quantitative research? We set an objective, we set hypothesis, we seek tools for measuring for obtaining that particular hypothesis. We determine the characteristics of sample. Then we collect data, and after collecting data for a fixed period of time, we stop it and then started analyzing the data and prepare a report. But here in grounded theory, there is the fundamental difference between any quantitative experimentation or quantitative study and grounded theory is that the data collection and analysis continue throughout the study. Suppose we may collect data about the rituals of social function. We analyze them to certain point. Then we then we may observe some new development, some new features in some new form. uh, I can give one example. Suppose the marital rituals, the rituals observed in marriage. West Bengal is mainly habitated by Bengalis, but in different, you know, in different areas of this state, uh, in different parts of the state, the marriage rituals are more or less same, but there are local variations. We may collect the preliminary data for all the areas of the state, but at a point of our study, we may observe, we may notice some new rituals, some new procedures in a particular area. Then also we collect this data at a later point of the study and going to analyze that. The next approach in qualitative research is phenomenology. In this method, what happens? The behavioral phenomena is explained with the help of conscious experience of events without using any theory, calculations, or assumptions from other disciplines. In 1998, Creswell, a qualitative researcher, uh, he used this method with the help of this following study. What he did there, he took the experience of patients about caring and non-caring nurses in hospital. How you will say that a person is caring? From his or her behavior. Now, if a patient or a number of patients, they describe a particular caregiver's behavior in a particular way, that he or she does this, does that, does these things, and together we put them to find a picture that is similar to the existing idea of care. Then we can call that caregiver as caring, that nurse as caring. And another type of description, another type of experience, when they are put together and form a report, they give us a picture about non-caring nurse. So it is all from the experience of the direct, direct stakeholders. What a participant is experiencing, he just puts it in his own word. From his words, we analyze and derive to a structure that can form a theory. The patients explained those nurses to be caring who show their existential presence and not mere their physical presence. What is the difference between that? Physical presence means that the nurse comes, she feeds you, she gives you medicine at time, she pushes injections and do all the things required for a patient. But if a nurse pays personal attention to the patient at the same time, that is a proof of her existential presence. She is providing her conscious effort. She is showing her presence to the patient. The existential presence of caring nurses refer to the positive response. Naturally, if a nurse gives attention to a patient, communicate with the needs of those patients, naturally it will generate positive response. And they also, that will generate positive response, and the nurses also show positive responses to the patient's needs. That is defined as existential presence. The relaxation, comfort, and security that the client expresses both physically and mentally. If I request for some service and someone says, yes, just wait a little, I am doing this will definitely a positive response, and that will generate positivity within the respondent. But if I say, wait, I'm giving you this, or just provide it silently, then it is definitely not positive response, and it will definitely not produce positive responses in respondents. The respondent may not feel relaxation, comfort, and security. Um, well, actually, the existential presence means the client, the attention of the nurse to both clients' stated and unstated needs. Sometimes we may not state our need, but if someone understands this for us, then it is his or her existential presence, which she or he tries to give me. That is phenomenon framework. In qualitative research, general framework seeks to explore phenomena using some structured methods like interviews, experiences, participant observation. And in quantitative research, it seeks to confirm hypotheses related to phenomena using highly structured method. So there is a difference in the structuredness of methods. Next parameter is objectives. It aims to describe variation, explain relationships, describe behavior, experiences, and norms of individuals and groups. It focuses more on the description of experience. And in quantitative research, the objective is to quantify variation. Here we describe variation, and in quantitative method, we quantify variation, that how much it varies. In qualitative, we say how it varies, and in quantified research, we say how much it varies, and it predicts causal relationship. The next parameter is questions. The questions used for data collection are open-ended one in qualitative research, and generally the questions used for data collection are close-ended ones in quantitative research. Open-ended one means there I have the freedom to express myself in response to a question. But in case of close-ended question, what happens? We have already structured answer for a particular question. Suppose, do you go to club often? The answer yes and no, or sometimes. You have to choose among these three alternatives only. But in case of qualitative research, you may say, yes, I go frequently, but sometimes I not do not feel going there. You may say a lot of things. The fourth parameter is representation of data. In qualitative research, how we collect data, how we represent it in form of notes, informal notes, in form of recordings and videotapes. And in quantitative research, data is represented in form of numbers and graphs. We apply questionnaire there, we score those questionnaire, we get certain numbers, we apply statistical analysis, we draw graph. That is how we represent data in quantitative research. Fifth parameter is research design. It is evident that while you are taking data in a flexible manner and you analyze them in a descriptive way, the research design will also be flexible in certain situational aspects. The questions used for the data collection differs individually and depends upon the response of the participant. And in quantitative research, the research design is predetermined and stable from the beginning. We first make a plan in quantitative research, but in qualitative research, we make a plan before collecting data, but it may change with the nature of response of the participants. We may meanwhile may change the in inter interim time, we may change the design of research according to the responses received. Now, of course, qualitative research is relevant in psychology. That is why we are reading it in details. Uh, Also, in related fields, sociology, nursing, all these things, in all these discipline, the relevance of qualitative research is high. Um, However, in comparatively natural science methods, more experimental researches are conducted to examine the causal relationships, wherein this approach uses a large number of participants, effectively captures aspects of human nature, and analyze them in a quantified way. On the other hand, qualitative research is less interested in explaining phenomena than in understanding them, and that is why it has several good relevance and implications in psychology. It is very much important to explain a phenomenon rather than understanding them. That what is going on is understanding, and why it is going on is the explanation. Qualitative research focuses on the latter. Um, I am not going to the detail of this part. You can understand from already what I have discussed. Let us come to ethnography as the qualitative research method. We have discussed a little about this method. There are certain terms used by ethnographers. Ethnography studies typically the culture of a community. So, in doing so, they use certain uh, terms. What are those terms? First term is symbols. Symbols refer to any tradition or material artifact of a particular culture, such as art, clothing, food, technology, and rituals. Mm. Through those symbols, a culture can be uh, described, it can be identified. Suppose that married Bengali women, they put vermilion on their hair parting, and they put conch shells in their in the form of bangles in their hands. So that is a typical Bengali tradition, and it is used majorly by Bengali Hindu uh, women. In other provinces of India also, there are certain ways to identify married uh, women from unmarried. So those are symbols of culture. Also, it is reflected in the art, like Madhubani art or sorry, orally painting. Those are typical form of arts in typical subcultures. The next common term is cultural patterning. What happens in cultural patterning? Let us find. In cultural patterning, in ethnographic research, the study of cultural patterns formed through relationships of different symbols are studied. Suppose a person who is coming outside of the Indian culture, he may not understand the significance of that putting vermilion and wearing conch shell bangles by Bengali women, Bengali married women. If they study the cultural pattern, then only they will be able to understand the meaning of those symbols. So, cultural patterning is a common term used by ethnographers. The third one is tacit knowledge. It refers to those cultural beliefs which are firm in nature. They are so deeply embedded in their culture that they rarely need to be discussed by the members in an explicit way. Such knowledge cannot be observed but needs to be inferred by the ethnographer. For example, the prejudices or the orthodox beliefs. There are certain rituals. What example can be given? Um, the rituals by the rituals for the pregnant women at their final month of pregnancy. There are certain tacit knowledge, tacit beliefs, orthodox beliefs behind those rituals. Those may not be relevant nowadays, but when those rituals are formed, there are certain orthodox beliefs behind that. That is why it is carried from one generation from another to another generation, and these are carried in a certain way. Fourth term, which is mostly used in ethnographical research, is situational reduction. It refers to the belief of ethnographers that structures and social dynamism are a result of interactions of several social situations. That means an example is given: criminal acts can be due to poor economic condition, frustration, parenthood, neighbors, and peer group of the criminals. In order to understand a particular behavior, A researcher, ethnographic researchers, an ethnographer, he or she should consider the social structure and social dynamism and the interplay interaction of different social situations behind that dynamism. Next comes assumptions in ethnography. Uh, this part also I want to skip because this is more or less descriptive, and I think you will be able to understand this. Uh, Let us go to types of ethnographic research. There are four types of ethnographic research: macroethnography, microethnography, emic perspectives, and etic perspective. Macroethnography means when we study broadly a definite cultural group like Indians, Indian culture. When we say Indian culture, it is macroethnography. The Turkish, when we consider nation as a whole. But in microethnography, the study of more specific cultural groupings such as local government, terrorists, those things are considered. What is emic perspective? It is the in-group or the members of a particular culture perspective. That means when we study a culture from their members' perspective, that is known as emic. And when we study the same thing, same culture from an outsider's view, like the travelers who come to our country in past and wrote the account in detail, that was an etic perspective. We know the famous account of Huan Sang. Huan Sang was a Chinese traveler who visited India. That was an etic perspective. And emic means someone writes, staying here, living here, living the culture. That is called emic perspective. There are certain purposes of ethnographic research naturally. It helps in cross-cultural analysis. It helps in analyzing the past events of the history. It helps in studying the behavior, experiences, and attitudes. And since there is a scope of close observation, it increases the chances of validity in the reports and theory formulated. There are certain steps of ethnographic method. First, we select a culture, selection. Then we review literature about that culture to get a brief idea and historical sketch of the culture. Then we must identify the variables like any other research which interests the researcher as well as the members of culture and needs to be explored. But why certain rituals, why certain procedures are going on in a culture? The members also want to know, and the researchers also. Then the fourth step is entry. The ethnographer, the researcher, he tries to enter the culture and gain the acceptance of the members of the culture. I talked about Jarwa little before. Then comes cultural immersion. If a traveler comes here, he just stayed here in this culture as guest for some days. Then he started living here almost permanently, marrying one of the local inhabitant. Then cultural immersion takes place for months, years, when ethnographers live in that culture. It is the ethnographic method. And while immersed in that culture, the ethnographer collects the necessary data for the research. Then He or she analyzes it and develop a theory. There are certain ethical guidelines definitely in qualitative research. The respondents and their responses should be respected by the researcher. Now you are going to our group for collecting data and you are not respecting them, their responses. You make fun of them. That will not do. First of all, the participants will not respond to you properly. And secondly, you are violating the ethics of research. The researcher must show respect and belongingness to the community. The respondents must be made aware of what is being analyzed by the researcher. If I take interview, if I want to take permission for observing certain things, then I must explain the respondents, I must explain the participants about the uh, purpose of my observation or purpose of my interview. And researcher must ensure and maintain the confidentialities of the respondents. This is a common ethics for any kind of research, be it quantitative, be it qualitative. And it is more important in qualitative because you are asking for responses in detail. Sometimes it goes to the personal level. And the researcher should be aware of the expected risks and benefits, including sorry, including the psychological and social aspects while performing the research. Um, they must know about the risk and benefits of a particular uh, psychological and social aspect of a culture. Why risk? Because when we are exploring certain social and psychological aspects of a culture, I may get resistance from the participants. And benefits means if I can do the successful exploration, if we can explore, I can explore successfully, then I can develop a new theory, a new perspective about that culture. Let us go to the unit 2 without much ado. Well, it discusses about grounded theory. Now, uh, we have read already about grounded theory a little. Let us jump to its steps. It is one of the basic approach, and it refers to the process of generation of theory, which is based on collection of data from multiple sources. It is the only method of qualitative research which uses quantitative data also as and when required. It aims to collect data and interpret the data from textual base. After the process of interpreting, the database is categorized into different variables, and then interrelationship between these variables are analyzed and studied. So there is a quantitative flavor in this method. And what are the goals? Uh, It consists of a series of systematic steps, and the data is collected from more than one sources. It assures to provide a good theory as the output. It emphasizes on the process by which the theory is evaluated. That means it also determines the quality of the theory generated. This approach also emphasizes on enhancing the theoretical sensitivity and to formulate hypotheses based on conceptual ideas. On the basis of the question asked by the researcher, question asked, the researcher tries to discover the participants' main concern and how they continually try to resolve it. And lastly, it also aims to generate those concepts which explain people's actions regardless of time and place. uh, if we go to the steps, we may found memoing. Memoing means for creating short notes in the events, situations that occurs on the spot or name or categorize certain things. Suppose providing particular way or uh, the cultural standard for women in a particular community that can be coded in a different way. So that can be code, there can be code notes for categorizing things that I am saying that for women. That means this category is for women only, not for men. So there is a categorization, there is a labeling. And again, in women, among women, there are married and unmarried, children, and adults, like this. Then the next part is sorting in grounded theory. Once the short notes or the memos are prepared, the collected information or data is sorted in order to organize them in proper order. Sorting helps in putting all the data in proper order. Like when we prepare field notes, whatever observe, we just keep notes. But there is, after gathering, after taking all the notes, we may find that there is a particular order in those processes. So in sorting part, we just order those situations, order those events or interactions or behavior. And there are some relevant ideas and information which we receive from this type of analysis, from this type of sorting. An insight we may develop from this kind of sorting, that oh, this comes in this sequence. And next comes the writing part. When we are going to the towards the preparation of theory, this is called writing. The ground theorist arranges, relates, and puts the collected information into words. Therefore, in this step, the researcher tries to give a shape as well as meaning to uh, relevant data. This may be a crucial stage as it is this stage in which the researcher interprets the information on the basis of his own perspective. Here comes the contribution of researchers in this stage. He tries to analyze it, tries to explain and linked with the existing relevant literature in order to put the theory in a scholarly context. There are different types of coding in grounded theory, like selective coding, open coding, axial coding. These three types of coding can be used. Selective coding means out of all available categories, the ground theorist selects one category to be the center or major one and then tries to relate the other categories with the selected major category. There can be open coding. That means as the phenomenon, as the uh, text comes, uh, sorry, as the information comes, the researcher tries to label it, identify it as it is already established in the text. That is open coding. The ground theorist on the basis of generalization categorizes names, events, or properties into more general categories or dimensions. And there is axial coding. Axial, in this process, what happens? relating the categories or properties to each other with the help of deductive and inductive thinking. The ground theories try to analyze the causal relations between these variables, that is, which of the code is the cause which has led to the occurrence of other codes, the context. So, identifying cause and context codes is known as axial coding. There are certain relevance and implications of grounded theory, and there are certain criticisms. I guess you may go through this, and this part is not very much complicated to understand. So, this is the first two units of block 4. Tomorrow, in the last class, we will be discussing uh, the next two units of block 4, discourse analysis. One is discourse analysis, and the last one is reporting and evaluating in qualitative research. These two units we will be discussing tomorrow in the last class. Thank you for your patient listening. Let us close the session here. Oh, someone has said that a network is extremely poor, voice is getting broken. Is it for everybody or a particular person? Okay, it is for everybody. Well, it can't be helped. That is the problem of network connection, I guess. Okay. Okay. Let us hope for a better network tomorrow. What to say? Thank you.